Good morning, everyone, and welcome to session 6. In session 6, 7, and 8, we're going to talk about how we take everything that we've learned to this place and implement it into your business. So today we're going to talk about managing substandard performance. And in the effort to be a great coach, you'll understand that managing performance is the key to growth. And those 3 things that every team leader wants: increase productivity, profitability, and efficiency. When performance is measured, performance grows. So today we're going to spend time talking about how we can essentially do that. Because realize, in our real estate businesses, you guys, for your team leaders, are the CEO of your business, but you're also the coach, the trainer, the operations director, and you wear a lot of different hats. So being able to dial down this conversation in a way that's effective to both the goals of your organization and to another team member is the key to growth. So in our roadmap, we are on the implementation phase. So as I previously said, we're going to take everything we learned about goals, roles, responsibilities, the stuff we learned about emotional intelligence, and as David and I say, with the iceberg. And now we're going to talk about how to use those active listening skills in the conversation of performance management. David?
A couple of things we're going to be focusing on today. First, assessing and managing substandard performance. We need to understand what substandard performance is and where it comes from. We're going to do that first today. Then that's related to our second topic, which is resetting a team member's role. Sometimes on your team, it's really important to do this, and we're going to talk about how to do this today. Chirag?
You know, and in spirit of Q&A, what we constantly hear is, this sounds really great. And this is what I hear from agents all the time. The stuff I learned sounds really great, but how do I actually use it in your business? You guys know that David and I, between these sessions, the way we run them, and our office hours, are obsessed with the time that you invest in here directly correlating to growth in your business. So we're going to have an agent come on live, and we're going to go through the actual process that we teach you and show someone how to reset their role. So in typical Compass fashion, this will be a great learning from reality moment. So you can actually see what the dialogue is, what are the challenges, and you realize that most of you guys are in the same place.
All right, assessing and managing substandard performance. It's an important, almost crucial skill for a leader to be able to manage performance successfully if you're going to succeed in your business. Not just your own performance, but the performance of anyone you bring onto your team. In fact, the moment you bring someone else onto your team, what you're doing is granting some of the success of your business to their ability to perform. And therefore, it's absolutely crucial for you to be effective in managing that performance. Most of us are in businesses where sometimes the performance is up to par, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's us, sometimes it's the other person. But as the leader of the team, you need to ensure that performance is meeting expectations as much of the time as possible. So let's start by just checking in again on what substandard performance is. Our definition here, you see it right there in the workbook. Substandard performance is performance that does not meet requirements or expectations. That is, we have an expectation for what is going to get done, or more specifically, how it's going to get done. And if we look at the way the business is working, there's all kinds of cases where some of it may not be done in the way that we would like to see it done. While we're thinking about what substandard performance is, we need to think crucially about what is the cause of substandard performance. When you look at where someone might be falling down or stumbling to get something done, you may think, well, he or she is just not doing this well or not doing that well. But if you take a step back as a leader and say, where is this coming from? It's really important to the success of your business. You can't just say, well, George failed here or Susan failed there. It's really important for you to think about, where's this coming from? It may be coming from Susan or George or someone else on the team, but it may be coming from you as a leader, or it may come from something else that's structural to the team, like how the roles are defined or something like that.
Ownership.
So Chirag, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Ownership, right? I think as a team leader, what I want everyone to do is take ownership of this process and for the whole process moving forward. As David continues to talk about the causes of substandard performance, look, it's a two-way mirror. It's either you or them or a combination of both, right? So understanding that as a leader, you need to take ownership of the process, David, I think is the first step for them to really check into where they need to be for this.
It's so important here. It's so easy to blame someone for something that's not getting done, but the reason it's not getting done is some combination of you, the other person, and how the business is unfolding, or kind of how it's rolling out. And so as the leader, you always have input on that. You get to kind of call the tune. So if your first inclination is just to blame so-and-so for something, that's fine. But really the solution is you and that other person being in some kind of a conversation. So causes of substandard performance. In virtually every case, 99% of the cases that we see, both in real estate and in other fields, there's really only two causes for substandard performance. The first is that the person doesn't have the necessary skills or capabilities to perform that function. For example, if you tell somebody to manage a CRM and they haven't yet mastered it yet, they simply don't have the skills necessary to do that. Similarly, if somebody needs to write a contract, that's a specific skill set that some people have, some people may not have to a acceptable degree. And if you give that requirement to somebody to write the contract and they're not capable of it, of course they're going to stumble. There are many cases where the person simply doesn't have the skills, the experience, or the knowledge to carry that out. The other cause that's really much more common is a misalignment in expectations between you and the other person about what the task is or in what form it should be delivered or exercised. This is actually far more common than the first cause. So if you recognize that there are these two causes out there, then you can ask yourself, okay, if I've got a substandard performance issue happening on my team, is it due to the former or is it due to the latter? And importantly, what should I do about it as a leader? Well, they're quite different. In the first case, if the person doesn't have the skill or the capability necessary to perform that function in the way that you want it to be performed or the way the client needs it to be performed, you have three options. Help the person get the training and skills and knowledge that he or she needs to do it. That's a training, opportunity. Second, if that's not possible, you can reassign the person to a different role. If the person's not able or not willing to be able to do that in that particular role, move him or her to somewhere else in the company. Sometimes that's a really good step because the person knows you, maybe works really well for you in other ways and just is not quite cutting the mustard there. So you can reassign the person to somewhere else. Third is, if neither of those are options or neither of those work out, you need to think about releasing that person because maybe they're not a good fit for your team. In the second case, if it's a case of misalignment of expectations or standards, then you need to be in a dialogue with the person about it. If it's a relatively there, then you could just have a conversation, an ongoing performance conversation that we're going to talk more about next session. But in many cases, it's a little more significant than that. When you look at the performance of a particular person, there might be 3 or 4 elements that are just not quite where you want them to be. That's the time where you want to reset the person's role. We're going to show you how to do that later today. So first, we're going to show you a 3-step process that you can use to assess the situation that you have and then figure out what you need to do next.
David,
so
I
follow
want
along. Yeah, go ahead, Chirag.
a couple scenarios for them just to think through prior to going into the 3-step process. We've talked a lot about people having online leads, right, and them not being able to convert them. So let's look at these 2 sections that you would talk about. Team member doesn't have the necessary skills and capabilities, or a realignment of the role, right? So ask yourself, have you provided them the necessary skills? Do they have the scripts on how to talk to an online lead and really effectively know what to say? Are they comfortable having that conversation? And the other side of that is are they clear in terms of like alignment or expectations that you should call an online lead back within 5 minutes or less, or the conversion rate goes down? Are they aligned on what you want them to do? Right, David, I think it's important for us to understand this. And then the third part is, and I really want to drill this aspect home, and we're going to talk more about this today. When do you realize that it's not, that maybe the team member is not the right fit, right? I want you all to be mindful of that because we all spend a lot of time with our team members. Remember, in sales, your job is not to sell the unsellables. It's to work with the people that are motivated and that want to engage with you on your terms. So David's going to walk us through this process, and I want to keep being mindful of how this shows up in your business. What are the examples? What do you say and what do you do? David?
Thanks. Okay, 3 simple steps here to assess where your team member's performance is falling short. First, and this is very easy, you can do it for your team at any time. You can do it for one person, you could do it for more than one person on your team. First, make a checklist of the team member's job responsibilities or deliverables. Write them down right on paper. These are the items that you are expecting from the individual. And maybe write down the form or the way that you're expecting them to do it. Maybe there's like a timeliness issue that's important to you, or there's an accuracy issue that's important to you, something like that. Make a list. You see it right there in the workbook. You can just list out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, as many responsibilities that you see that person has. Then after you've done that, take a minute to look at each one by one, and assess it. Ask yourself, is this person meeting my expectations or the whole team's expectations in a solid way, like a very strong way, or is there some kind of a gap there? If there is a gap there, what kind of a gap is it? Is it a slight gap? Is it a moderate gap? Or is it a huge gap? Check off the box for that particular expectation or deliverable. Do it for the second one, do it for the third one, as many responsibilities as you understand that person to have. You may find in the end that you have 4 or 5 responsibilities that you think that person is accountable for, and actually from their point of view, they only had 2 or 3, which of course points to a misalignment. We'll get to that more in a minute. So first, make a list of all the expectations that you have. Then look at them one by one and see how you assess that person's failure to achieve any of those. That's step 1. Something to add to that, Chirag?
Yeah, in doing this, right? How many people write the word clear if you feel you and your team member in the chat box have a clear idea of both what the expectations are of the team leader, right, David?
Yes.
And what the team members' expectations are of what they're to do on the team. I'm interested to see if people want to write clear, unclear, and this is a moment to be honest, and like as we always say, it's a safe space. So I'm interested to see where everyone is with their team members. Are you clear? Are you unclear? Here they come. Clear, I think. Unclear, unclear, unclear. Clear, I think. Clear with some, unclear with others. Unclear, clear, unclear, clear.
Clear but shifts over time. That's another one too.
Tom D. Domenico, my man, that's a great answer right there. So there's some of you I know on here that are writing clear, but it really is unclear. Just because I know you well. I'm not calling anybody out here, but look, there's a two-way thing here, right? It's kind of like, say David and I David's a team leader, I'm his team member. David might think he's clear in his expectations of me. And in speaking with people's team members as a coach, I would say 9 out of 10 times the team member's like, yeah, they know exactly what they're supposed to do. And I'll ask the team member this one question: what do you think could be done to improve the success of the team? And 9 out of 10 times they all say the same thing. I wish it could be more structured. I wish it could be more organized. And I wish I actually understood what's expected of me, because there's always new things being thrown at me. Because that's the nature of real estate, right? Real-time real estate that people say they operate in. So that, David, that's the clarity issue that people have. So, you know, ask your team members, do they feel, right? This goes back to the whole feelings things. Do they feel that they have been provided clarity on all the things that are expected of them, right? Like, as David will continue this conversation, and a handful of you guys have done this, and we've talked about it in office hours, people have actually, David, gone to their teams and asked them, what are their motivations to join the team? What are their expectations? Are they clear about their roles? And they've all shared the same success story of how much better it's made the other person feel, how excited they've gotten, how engaged they've gotten, because it shows an ownership by the team leader and also shows that you care. David?
Yeah, it comes up all the time. Just bringing the conversation up moves you about 30% forward without even actually changing anything, just because it becomes a topic for discussion. So often, and we see this over and over and over again, the team leader thinks he or she is clear, and when we interview the team member, we realize that he or she is not as clear as we thought they were. And of course, that's what we're talking about here, a misalignment of expectation. And you know, how many times have you had a miscommunication with your spouse in your life, or your significant other, or someone in your family, or a business partner? It happens every day. And in the business setting where things are changing all the time, it's no surprise that sometimes what we think we're clear about is not quite clear, or maybe it was clear a week ago and today it's changed because conditions have changed. And so it requires all of us as leaders to make sure that we're continuously checking in on clear. Remember what we say, and sometimes we say something like, intention doesn't always equal impact. In other words, the way you say something and the way you expect it to land with somebody doesn't mean it lands that way. And the reason is because we have different icebergs. People hear it in a certain way that we didn't intend. So we thought we delivered a clear message or communication, but the other person didn't hear it the way that we thought. And therefore, the misalignment is going to show up later in terms of a gap or a failure or something missing. So you make your particular list, put everything down that you see as a responsibility, and you check off on the right-hand side there, is this person meeting the expectation here? Is this person failing to meet the expectation? Then number two, take a few minutes to look at what you have here. Don't jump right to what do I need to do now? Take a little time to reflect on what's on that page. Think of it as a performance dashboard. Look at the completeness of the dashboard and say, what's happening here? Is this a slight gap? Is this a huge gap? Is this a moderate gap? Is it tied to just one deliverable, or is it across the board? Thinking a little bit through what you have there will help you figure out what your best response is. You can ask yourself a couple of questions that are really helpful in this kind of evaluation of it. How far below your expectations are those responsibilities in the fail to meet column? Are they slight? That's one thing. If they're severe, that's something different. You need to know which. How high are the stakes involved for each responsibility in the fails to meet column? If it's a small gap that doesn't really make much of a difference to the success of the business or your profitability, maybe it's not something that you really need to make a big deal about. But if it is something that's actually going to affect the process or the sale or something like that, then the stakes are really high, even though the substandard performance might be slight. So that's another way to evaluate what you have there. So as you're looking at your dashboard, make an assessment of what you see there, and then we'll talk about what you do after that. Chirag, something to add to that?
You know, how high are the stakes, right? Who feels that their team members, what they're working on is high stakes, right? And the last one is, are the causes due to the lack of knowledge, skills, or misalignment of expectations, right? I think we all need to be really clear. And if you look at this, Dahlia wrote this, I think we just assume they know. So based on that entire statement and all the time that you guys have committed to this, don't you think it's a good idea to ask them what they know, what they don't know, and how you can help them more in the process? They call it a team because they're all working together for the same common goal, right? So if people, as David says back in session one, do the goals of the organization, are they all the same, right? Christine wrote, well, I put it on a Trello board and the job's not, and they don't do it, so clearly the job isn't done. Well, obviously there's some miscommunication. So Christine, in those tasks that aren't getting done for you, how severe is it, right? And how many responsibilities and deliverables are there really? Like, we need to be clear on our end as team leaders first before we can effectively have the conversation. And to kind of re-echo what David said, please don't be impulsive and go through the whole process, and be strategic and think out and map out the conversation you're going to have with somebody. Because this is a conversation that is very much going to go to how somebody feels, and how you have that conversation and what's under their iceberg all is going to play into effect here. So be really mindful before you do this. David?
Yep. So the last part of this is, after you've written down all the responsibilities there and made an assessment of where the gaps might be, you need to ask yourself, where's the failure coming from? If the failure is due to a lack of knowledge or skills, as I said before, consider training the person, giving the person the skills and capabilities that he or she needs to be able to do it right next time. If that doesn't work, or that's not possible for you, consider reassigning the person. If that doesn't work, maybe think about releasing the person and bringing someone else in who's a better fit. If the failure is due to a relatively small misalignment, if you look at that particular chart that you filled out and it's pretty minor, you can have a conversation about just that issue, and it's not a full-blown reset at all. It's just performance management discussion. And we will talk about that more at session 7, so don't worry. But if there are multiple significant failures, I would say more than 2, then you really need to consider doing a full role reset. It sounds like a big deal. It's not really a big deal. All of you can do it, and we're going to show you how to do that in just a couple of minutes.
So as you kind of put these 3 pieces together, Aaron had wrote in the chat, it's a 2-way conversation. If they feel like they need to speak to you, they can come up to you. And look, what Aaron said in his setting, right? If that's how his team operates, it means he's created an environment and a culture where somebody feels comfortable doing that. because they know by asking the question, they're not going to be letting him down or frustrating him or impeding on his time. They understand that that's part about the team, the growth, and the goals. So when you have that kind of buy-in and culture, it's good, right? And the only flip side of it is someone constantly asking you how to do things, where these things are, when you've provided them the skill set, the materials, and the process, and they're just not following it. Those are two different things. So clarity is really important. So we're going to go on to our inspired change here. So what I want you guys to identify now, while this is all fresh in your head, Dahlia, we're going to go through the misalignment, so don't you worry. Inspired change. Where is substandard performance happening on your team right now? And which of the two causes is it behind it? I want you guys to write this on your workbook if you want to share in the chat box. We always love hearing what people say. And think about in substandard performance. Think about your admin. Think about your buyer's agents. Think about other supporting team members, whether they're escrow agents, whether it's someone doing marketing for your team, right? And look, even when you work with vendors, right? Like we do social media management for people, and we have to constantly make sure, David, right, that we're aligned on our expectations of the client and what our expectations are of them, right? So this is an ongoing thing. So even think about the people who are your partner vendors that you work with, right? Where can you improve performance? And really, what's the cause of it? And the big word that we all want to talk about here and think about here is communication. How effectively are you communicating your values, your deliverables, your standards, and your expectations? So I'll give everyone a moment to go do that. So if you look in the chat, David, there's all types of different things. From Debbie's comment is really interesting. She says sometimes they don't think they know how they fit into the big picture, so they don't see how they can contribute, right? That right there, Dahlia, is a misalignment thing, because you don't know where you fit in, right? How are you aligned with the role, with your role and the goals of the organization?
Felicia picks up on that too, Chirag, where she says, I think it's really helpful when everyone on the team knows the annual goal and what percentage they're counting on for. Remember, folks, what we're talking about here is getting everyone on the same page for the goals, the roles, and the rules of engagement. That is how we're going to work together. And we see over and over again that when there is a failure or a gap or a stumble, somebody along the way didn't have the same perspective of the goals or the roles, and frequently the rules of engagement.
Guys, keep these fresh in your head. Resetting team member roles. So let's talk about this for a minute now. When you're talking effectively about resetting team member roles, hold on a second. I just realized that you guys are seeing part of this on the slide. Sorry about that. When you talk about resetting roles, I think this is a perfect time, given COVID and all the stuff that's going on, to go back to each member of your team and help them gain clarity. Right? David's going to walk you through a detailed process, and then we're going to show you how to do this with an agent who actually has a challenge in her business on resetting a role. But I want to challenge you to go to all of your team members and ask them these two questions. What are your motivations for joining the team? What are your expectations of me as a team leader? And here's the third bonus one, which really has helped with culture with all the people that we've shared this with. What are the disappointments that you faced on the team that you'd like to avoid in the future? Now, that is something really hard to ask somebody, because they are going to tell you the mistakes that you've made, and you could be either ready to own them or you could be combative. Now, that is a choice in mindset and a choice in philosophy. So as we go through resetting a team member's roles, I'd encourage you to ask everyone those three questions. Everyone on your team, every time you bring on a new team member, make sure you ask them those three questions. It will drastically change the experience of both you, the team leader, and the team member or the other person coming in. David?
Resetting a team member's role is really important. It can be done at any time, and all of you can do it. A simple 5-step process that we're going to take you through right here, and then we'll talk about it with one of the agents who's on the call with us. Remember that when you want to reset a team member's role, what you're saying is things aren't working right and I need to get on the same page with this particular team member. You can do it with one person on the team, you can do it with everyone on the team, but it's all around the role of the individual. First thing, invitation. Don't simply say to your team member, I've got a new idea for your role here, or here's what your role is going to be going forward. There's a couple of problems with that approach. One is, even if you're clear in your mind and what you have as the kind of vision for what that role can be is the right vision, you're not allowing the person to participate in getting there. What you're saying is, I'm going to be responsible for this, and all you have to do is listen and do what I'm saying. Unfortunately, that doesn't give the individual the opportunity to buy in to what's going to happen. Also, if you're not going to invite the person into the process, they might think they have no stake. They might say they have no voice in whatever the process becomes. And that is a big turnoff. So first, make sure that instead of just saying, I'm going to change your role, ask for the person to participate in the process. It could be something like this. Susan, I'd like to talk with you about your role going forward so we can both be clear about what it is and how we can work together to make it a win-win for you and the team. Would you be willing to have that conversation with me? All the years we've been doing this, we've never had anybody try this and hear the person say, no, I'm not interested in having that conversation with you. But guess what? If they were, time to get off the team. They're not the right kind of person for your team in the first place. So first understand that you need to invite the person into the process. They might say, yeah, I would love to do that, but I'm a little busy right now. Can we do it tomorrow? In which case you say, perfectly fine. Let's do it tomorrow. It has to be a conversation that they can be in as well as you. Chirag, something to add on number one, or should we keep moving?
Let's just keep on moving. The quick takeaway is, look, it has to be in a benefit to another person. If you're going into the conversation where they feel they're going to be criticized, they're going to come up, they're going to show up in a different way, and they feel like it's going to make their job and life better. So create that experience for someone. David?
Step number two, get your team members' current perspective of the role and what it's like for that person. This is where your active listening comes in. This is where your emotional intelligence comes in. You should be employing both of those skills as you go through this kind of step. There's a whole bunch of questions that you can ask here, and you can start with a simple statement. Hey, it's important for me to understand how things look from your perspective, so I have a list of questions I'd like to explore. For example, and here's a big one, you may get an answer that you didn't expect. What do you see as your primary responsibilities at this point? If you've never asked that question, it's very likely that the person's going to give you an answer that you didn't anticipate. And that's, of course, why there's a misalignment. But there's a lot of other questions that are really important for you to ask. We've listed them here in the workbook. You don't need to use them all in that order. You don't even need to use them all. But they're all extremely valuable to help you get at what's going on in their iceberg at that particular moment. What is it you really like about your role right now? And why? How often have you ever asked that question of your teammate? I bet you maybe never have. What is it you really don't like about your role right now? That's an equally important question to ask. This gets the motivation of the person, the expectations of the person. Which ones are the ones that you're doing well and which are the ones that you feel you're struggling with? Because whatever you think they're struggling with, I can almost guarantee that they have a slightly different idea of that. So often we think that the person's performance is falling short. They think they're doing the job great. It didn't occur to them that they're not measuring up to performance standards for whatever reason. That's a very valuable question. And then it comes back to these questions Chirag was talking about before too. What is it that I'm doing that's making things easier for you? Or what is it that I'm doing that might be making your job more difficult? Where am I communicating clearly with you? Where am I not? We asked a couple questions before about, are you clear with your people? And many people in the chat box said, yeah, clear, clear, clear. Some said not so clear. It's almost certain that in some areas you're communicating clearly and in other areas you're not. This second step in the process is for you to understand what the communication looks like from the other person's side. Chirag?
You know, oftentimes when we talk about going on a listing presentation or working with the buyer, we have all of our steps planned out. And we always talk about the words, the journey of the customer. Where are they today? Where are they going? And how do we help them get there? So prior to having this conversation, and when we're on number 2 of this process, pick your questions and look at how the conversation is going to align with each other. A lot of times people can go into these conversations excited or impulsive, right? And depending on what your mindset is, you have to A, detach yourself from the outcome, B, you have to be completely present and a great active listener, and C, employ those tactics we taught you about emotional intelligence. And if you actually take the time and pick 5 questions, 3 questions, and realize how the conversation's going to go, how it's going to flow, maybe write down some of the questions you're going to ask them to keep them engaged. It's a chance to use empathetic listening, and you put the conversation through that way and you think about it from the other person's perspective. Well, guess what? They're going to ask about how they see their role. You're going to ask them about what they like about the role. Then you're going to ask about what they would change about the role, how you could be more helpful. Okay, this is how their mind would go. And then I could ask them maybe the 5th question that might be a little more challenging one, but they'll be in a better mindset because the first 4 things made them feel good. This is how we want you to think through this, because you have to do these things strategically versus just reactively. David?
So moving into the third part of the conversation, envisioning the new role, it's really important. I want to caution everybody not to skip step number 2 and go right into step number 3 here. It's very easy when we do something like this to try to get to the end point, like what should we do instead? But if you haven't adequately explored how the person sees the situation right now, you're missing an opportunity. So resist the urge to skip from step 1 in this process to step 3. Make sure you spend a little time hearing what the person has to say about his or her perspective or experience at this time. Once you think you've got that, and that's the active listening, then you can say, okay, I've got a pretty good picture. I think I know what you're talking about or what it's like from your point of view. Now let's think together about where we could go with the role instead. You could say something like, let's think about what your role could look like going forward and why. Some questions here to explore. What are some things you'd like to consider changing about your role? What's something you'd like to do the same? Why? You might learn something useful if you ask that question. Sometimes the person has a very good reason why he or she would like to keep one piece of it static and actually shift something else. Very important questions. What could I do differently that would be more helpful for you? This gets to the expectations that we were talking about earlier. They may have expectations, they never thought about voicing them until they find themselves in this conversation with you. What things do you think you need more clarity on? Almost certainly there's 1 or 2 areas that they think they need more clarity on or would like to see greater clarity on in the future. So as you're hearing these particular comments from the person, I hope you're going to be taking notes here as well, because you can jot down what you hear and think about it both in the moment and later on. But this third stage is all about listening, just as the second stage is. Once you've done this, then you've prepared yourself to start thinking about where you might go from here. Chirag, something to add?
Just be present and don't be reactive as somebody's talking.
Okay, so you've gone through these 3 steps. It's just a conversation. It's not a big deal, but it's an important one. So assuming that you've gone through these 3 steps, you have a good understanding of where the person sees him or herself in the role, or how it's been like, what it's been like up to now, and how it could be going forward. Now it's time to get down to really agreeing on how you'll both see the situation going forward. This is step 4, agreeing on the new normal. Now you could have the three steps we've been through already, and then pause there. You don't need to continue the conversation at that point. If it makes more sense for you to both think about it and you say, you know what, I've heard a lot today, maybe you have too. Let's pause and come back tomorrow at 4 o'clock and continue the conversation. You can do that if you want. There's nothing wrong with that. When you are ready to take this next step, it's really important for you both to say, this is the point where we are going to come to alignment on the things going forward, unlike the way we didn't do so before. You could start with something like this. Thanks for sharing all of your thoughts about your role. It's really important for us to be on the same page going forward about what you'll be doing and how I can support you to be successful. Based on our previous conversation, I've created this list of responsibilities for each of us. I'd like to go through it to make sure we're both comfortable with it. Can we do that? So very often when you have these first conversations, you go through step 1 through 2, 3, you pause and you say, okay, I've got a sense of it now. I'm going to write down some responsibilities here. But you notice in what I just read to you, it's our responsibilities, not your responsibilities. In other words, if we're going to agree to have a set of responsibilities to each other, then there's a list on there for me and there's a list on there for the other. So if you think that this whole process is simply for you to lay out what it is you expect from the other person going forward, that's not what this is about. It's about clarifying that and clarifying what it is the person can expect from you. So you build your list. Here are the things that I'm expecting from you. Here are the things that I understand you're expecting from me. And in this 4th stage of the process, you're going to go through both of those lists one by one and come to agreement on them. This is what aligning is all about, is having a clear list for each of you and acting from that particular written space. This is not about assumption, right? Somebody talked about assumption before. This is where we always go wrong. I assumed you would do it this way, or I assumed you would do it at that time. No, we've worked through these 3 steps to get us to the point where we can create a list of deliverables from each of us to the other. This is the interdependence of the relationship. Chirag?
In doing this process, your team member now has ownership of their job, their process, and they feel inclusive to what they're doing. And I think that's very valuable if you're going to get the re-buy-in from a team member that ends up staying versus someone who will go through this process. And this is how you could weed out the good from the bad, right, David? If they've helped create the process and then they still can't execute it, what do you think then?
Yeah, you know, it's so much of this work is an ongoing process of communication, and it's an ongoing process of re-clarification. And so when you're talking about performance management, you're really talking about alignment, communication, as opposed to expectation and disconnect. And so what we're trying to give you here is a simple process that allows you to be in alignment, be in communication, and stay that way. Okay, final step. Once you have agreed on what the deliverables or expectations are in both directions, remember it's two-way conversation, then you have one crucial step that's left, and that is agreeing on an assessment strategy. How will we go forward to make sure that both of us are meeting the expectations that the other has? It could be something simple like saying, okay, we're on the same page now about how we'll be working together, so it's a win-win for all. Let's talk about how we can assess how we're doing. And there are some more questions for you here to think about. How often should we talk about how things are going? It could be once every 30 days, could be once every 60 days, could be once every 90 days, could be all 3 of those. We're going to give you a model in the next session we call 5-5-30-30, which you can adopt or adapt for your particular needs that helps you do just that. But in resetting a role, it's crucial for you to both agree on how are we going to communicate going forward given these commitments we have to each other. How will we measure success for each of the responsibilities? Sometimes that's really easy to do, sale or no sale, or dollar value, something like that. But it's harder to measure certain things like managing certain aspects of a CRM, or you know, some kind of a process that's complex and complicated, and it's not easy to plug in a yes or a no, or you know, done or not done. It's really important to come onto the same page about how we're going to assess that. What do you think you'll need from me for us to assess ourselves effectively? It's a great question to ask, and we almost never ask it. What does this team member believe he or she will need from you, and are you able to provide that? And finally, another question, which is kind of like just like continuing to think about it. What else do we need to think about to make sure we're successful over the long term? You might be surprised what kind of an answer you get to that. Ultimately, though, the point here is it's not just agreeing on what our deliverables are to each other. It's agreeing on a mechanism to measure and guide our success. Chirag?
So how many people are going to reset a team member's roles and start thinking through this conversation? Let's see a yes in the chat box. David, it's always interesting to see at the end of each section kind of where everybody is.
Yeah.
Livia, you're up live. So can we put the panelists, can we promote Livia up to a panelist as we go through the Inspire Change? See a lot of yeses there, David.
Yep, great to see.
Perfect. So let's go into our Inspire Change. Whose role on your team would you like to reset? What are the expectation standards you would like to reset? So jot down a couple things in your book here and in your notes and be really clear and have concise clarity of the conversation you're going to have. I cannot hammer in this point enough. Be planned, be purposeful, be thoughtful, be caring. Remember, when someone works really hard for you, it is their intention to do good, you know, and you have to realize that in those intentions, there might be things that might not have happened, but it actually could be our own faults as team leaders for not communicating clearly, right? How many people are on this call sitting in their chair being like, yeah, you know, I wish I really gave them some more direction. Maybe it's on me. I had a coaching call the other day, David, and we were talking about reevaluating the standards of their team and one of their team members. And the question that I had is do you want to let your team member go based on what you shared, or do you think it's time to reevaluate the way that you communicate? They thought about it. They got defensive at first, a little bit. And then ultimately their answer was like, no, I need to invest more time into training them so they actually have clarity on their job. So we agreed on what the process would look like. We defined a time period of how to evaluate the performance. We let them know it's going to be done 30, 60, 90 days. And at the end of 90 days, this was a performance review cycle. And that these are the things we're looking for. These are the challenges. She took ownership in the process, and thus we're going to implement this over the next 90 days. So how do you feel, David, to share about to the rest of the group about implementing timeframes for the things that they're doing?
Yeah, we talk about a shelf life when we talk about decisions that are made, and every decision that gets made has a shelf life. That is, it should expire after a certain period of time, or at least we should review it and to see if it still makes sense after a certain period of time. Certain decisions may last for only a week. Others may last for 2 weeks. Others may be ongoing ones, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, a year. It doesn't really matter what it is, but so often we make a decision or we make a choice on something and we just let it go from there. And what we really need to do is close the loop by recognizing when we need to look at this particular thing again and choose it again, or talk about it and perhaps choose something else.
Remember, guys, having the conversation is not just enough, right? It's not just making the initial phone call. It's all the follow through. The 6 to 8 times you follow up on a lead before you get to sale. Well, look, resetting the role is first part of it, but then setting actual time deadlines and follow-ups is the part of Inspire Change. All right, my favorite part, learning from reality. So can we promote Livia? Somebody? Let's see.
I think I'm on here now.
Hello. Do you want to turn your camera? Oh, hello.
Hi, Livia.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good.
All right.
I'm
So
needing to reset, though.
are you excited about this right now?
Yeah, I am.
So before she says a little bit about who she is, where she's from, and she's going to give us her situation, our goal in this is to leave her with actionable items that she can go back and have a conversation. And we wanted everyone on the call to see what this looks like, how to think through it. Put questions in the chat box. I'll be monitoring the chat box as David speaks with Livia. And we kind of want to keep this a three-way dialogue where we could answer your questions, answer her questions, and where we could all leave comfortable, confident, and inspired to have these conversations with the team members. So Olivia, tell them a little bit about where you're from, where do you work, for other people where they could send their referrals to. Go ahead.
Yeah. Referrals to Cape Cod. So I have a team of 9 agents. I owned an independent that we sold and we partnered with Compass. I'm incredibly excited to be here. It's only June 1st was my first day, so we're still getting into the nuts and bolts. But we live in a beautiful waterfront, amazing community. And so all of you with clients looking to escape, send them my way.
So in terms of your business, right, you had sent me a couple scenarios and we're going to talk about your ISA. So tell us about what the challenge, what's going on, and David's going to literally walk you through the conversation of how to reset their role.
Okay, first let me say how fabulous she is with certain things, because she blows me away with her ability to connect with people, especially over the phone. So for online leads, it's like her wheelhouse. And I watched her as a realtor, she was a full-time realtor. She went through some personal trials and some hardships, not caused by her. And so it was a perfect time to align her with an ISA role. She's great on the phone. She's a single mom now, so she needed to be home and able to work when her daughter was there. She has an innate desire to please, and she works really hard to keep people happy. So those are all the positives. It seemed like a perfect fit to come into the ISA role. The challenge we're having is, in the spirit of listening, I sat down with her when we first created the role, and I outlined what my expectations were. And David, I legit have
It's quite a list.
Oh yeah. I mean, I said, okay, you know what, to make this easy so there's not a miscommunication, let's talk about what we have needs with, and then we'll both agree on what we're going to do. And so together, this was pre-COVID, but we sat down and we made a list and we went over it twice. I said, are you excited? She had input on it. And we felt good. And then I checked in with her again a couple months ago, but in full candor, I have not had, because of COVID, a true sit down with her. We've had Zoom meetings and phone calls and texts about things that have adapted or changed. Where I'm having a real issue is clearly expectations. We've written it down, we've agreed, we both signed it, we do check-ins, but this is, I'm going to give you a very specific that just happened. This week, we had some new things we were rolling out with some online leads, and I walked her through what we were doing, how we were doing it, why we were doing it. I sent her a link to the video to watch that I had watched. I asked her to watch it. I asked her to post a Loom video to our team about what the expectations for the agents were going to be by the end of the week. And then we were going to go forward with making sure all the agents had implemented before our call tomorrow. So on Monday, I pinged her again, said, just making sure we're doing this. She said, yes, on it, done. Great. Tuesday, I don't see any video or any post to the agents. Agents are asking me questions that would have been answered had she done it. So Wednesday, I pinged her. She said, I'm tied up. I'm really busy, but I'll get right back to you. Now I'm going to take ownership. It was easier for me at that point to just do the video I had asked her to do. So I did the Loom video. I put it on our Facebook group. And the response I got was, great minds think alike. I was about to do it. Okay. So then I said, well, you know what? That's fine. Things are crazy right now. I get it. Everyone's busy. But can you just make sure that by Thursday, we have made sure all the agents have implemented the steps they have to take? Absolutely. I have my list. I'm all over it. So this morning I reached out to her and said, how are we? Oh, we're all good. So I logged into the back end to check everything, and none of it's been done.
Got it. Sounds like a misalignment of expectations. When she says it's all good, and from your point of view, it's not all good, that's what we're talking about here. So a couple of observations as you've told us your story. First of all, it sounds like you've done a lot of things well, a lot of things right. You created a written list of the expectations that you had way back. You talked through that list together. You both agreed that that's what she was going to be doing and how she was going to be doing it. And indeed, she is doing a lot of those things quite well. It's hard to know for sure from our point of view and hearing your story, whether that person really agreed to all of those things or was just saying, yes, ma'am, because you're the boss. Do you have any sense that perhaps she was committing to certain things by saying yes, that she wasn't really fully committed to?
I do, because it's not being done. And I know she is a people pleaser, so I know she wants to keep me happy in the moment.
Yeah.
But there is a challenge because I suspected that. So the last call we had on Friday, I said, I just want to powwow. I've been doing all this, like, you know, trying to really watch how I listen. And I said, I just want to know, how do you feel about the job description, my expectations, and what you're doing? And she said, I feel like I have a lot of room for growth. There's a lot of other things I want to take on. And I said, that's exciting. That's great. What are you thinking? So we went through a list of things she wanted to do, and some were really grand and huge and not necessary. I mean, just, I praised her, but it would, I know based on her performance, it would be too much for her. I love that she wants to think tank it, but it won't get done.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, so here's what we're going to put into play this week. Should we do it this week? From the things you said, yes, I'm all over it. I recapped it with an email. She sent me back an email saying, I'm so excited, can't wait to do it. Not one of them, David, has been done. Not one.
And do you have any idea why it's not being done?
When I talked to her, she says, I'm working on it.
Got it. Okay.
But I mean, the tasks are like, one of the things she said is she wants to really do shout outs for the agents in our group, in our team that are rocking and rolling. She wants to give them an intranet shout out so they feel acknowledged.
Yep.
Fabulous. I think we should totally be doing that. So I waited all week. I mean, we have offers coming in, people are writing business, and there hasn't been one shout out. Got
it. So there's a couple of things here. One, she's showing a real motivation to talk about new things when she's not even completing the ones that are already on the table.
Yes.
And that's something for you and all people to understand. When you're dealing with someone who wants to go someplace else that's not even part of the conversation, that may be their motivation, but that's not serving the team. And so we certainly cannot do anything that's going to encourage them to keep working on what they're motivated to do at the expense of what they're not motivated to do. It's a great question that you asked before. How do you feel about your role and how we're doing this together in the larger team? Great question. It's a big question. In many cases, a more specific question would be required to help you get at the nub of what's happening here. For example, what is getting in the way of you doing this particular task at this moment? And it may be that what's getting in the way of it this week is not the same thing that's getting in the way of it last week. And so you need to know that as a leader. Secondly, if you're going to ask her something about why she's not getting done what she's not getting done, it's very important for you to ask a question like, where am I not being clear enough for you? Or you may even have to say, can you state again for me what it is that you think I'm asking you to do? These particular very specific questions can sometimes help you narrow down where the cause is coming from. You know that in the Navy, they always, the captain says to the driver of the submarine, right rudder 10 degrees. And the other person says, aye, aye, sir, right rudder 10 degrees. They repeat back exactly what the person said. That's a very common tactic in the military to make sure that these communications don't turn out to be, mistaken. And so it's very important for you and for anyone in a situation like this to make sure that what you're saying is landing the same way you intend it, because it sounds like sometimes it's not for her. When she says it's all good, there's a whole bunch of stuff in there that, some of it might actually be good, some of it might not. So breaking it down into the specifics and understanding which particular ones of these she sees a barrier and which ones she doesn't see a barrier is really important.
So I have something to add too in doing this, and Olivia, listening to what you're saying. So what it sounds like is you guys are having conversations versus creating and implementing a structured process, right? So we talk about this in terms of communication. Imagine like David and I are talking. There's an imaginary arrow between us that points both ways, right? Does she have a clear task? Does it have a concise deadline? And, have you shared with her exactly how you want it to be done? And then that is communicated to her, right? I'm communicating to David. For her, how clear is the task she's doing? How concise is the deadline? And does she have everything she needs to be successful, right? So in doing this, people that have her personality type, they're excited, they want to be innovative, they want to take ownership. The great thing about those people is they bring that stuff to the table. The challenging stuff about that is that's how their mind is working. They're constantly moving forward. So as a leader, you need to create more structure around her role and alignment in saying that, look, make an idea list with her possibly, right? Where she could start putting her ideas on. And then you could start putting in months you want to implement them and create a structured process that shows her when these things are done and they're implemented, then we could move on to the next thing. And asking her questions like, what's your plan to implement this? How do you see the deadlines for this? Because if you set a deadline and it's clear and it's concise and it's in writing, then if a deadline isn't met, then guess what? Then you have something to go back on and talk about. But the way this is, as David would tell you, right? David, do you think this is a misalignment here in expectations?
Absolutely it is. The other element that could be missing here for you, Olivia, and for others too, is step 5 in the process, agreeing on the assessment strategy. It could be that you give this particular task to this person, and then you both agree that at this time tomorrow, we're going to gather on the phone call, and we're going to talk about how, whether you've achieved this particular step or not. And you may say, well, I'm a busy leader. I've got so many other things to worry about. I can't take time to really watch this person at that level of detail. But you may need to do it a little bit here to make sure that that person is being held accountable for that particular task. The sooner that you can reach that assessment moment, the sooner you can realize that there's something that's getting in the way.
I wanted to just share too, and this is just on a personal note, in her life, there is a pattern, and that's where I'm wondering if my expectations. So as an example, I want to say it was January, her daughter, who is good friends with my daughters, went around telling everyone she knew they were heading to Paris in March. And they're going to Paris, they're taking a trip, they're so excited, they're renting this beautiful condo, and she had pictures of it, and they're doing it. And they're telling everyone. She never mind you, COVID happened, but the way she works, she never started to plan the trip. She never told everyone she was doing it, excited about the possibility. She's done the same with lifestyle habits and changes, going vegan and then not. And I see such good intentions, and I see huge potential from her. but I feel like she gets really caught up in the excitement of a new concept or a new thing or a new anything. And she tells everyone about it, but then the implementation doesn't happen. And she moves on to the next one, which I've been cognizant of. So that's why I have my checklist. And my question to you is, how micromanaging should I be? Because she needs a therapist in a new job, someone said. I feel like I'm getting to the point of super micromanaging right now, because now, like, I asked her to do the shout out. She didn't do it. I said, everyone need to be on. So this morning I said, I'm going to be checking in with you by 3 o'clock. I need to make sure everyone is aware of what my expectation is for tomorrow's conference call. Okay, I'm on it. And now she's pinging me nonstop with every step she's doing. But that almost derails my momentum myself, because now, like I told Chirag, sometimes I feel like it's just easier if I just did it myself.
So
Yeah.
I'm going to share something here, David, because I've had a conversation with Livia and I know her on a little more of a personal level, right? Like, so everyone has something under their iceberg, and under your iceberg has this undying willingness to help everybody, where you tend to always see the good, and no matter how much the bad affects you, you're focused on the good. And I can share this because this was a very important lesson I learned in my life from a mentor that could apply to everyone that's a team leader. It's like, have you ever met somebody that you see all these great things in them and you think, wow, I'm going to take these things and I'm going to help them hit the next step in their life because they haven't done it for themselves? Most of the time, where does that leave you? It's the word starts with a D. What's that word, Livia? How many, you meet those people that have all these great qualities and you're like, I'm going to help them develop it. They haven't done it in their life. They haven't done it in their business. And you put a lot into them and you generally end up feeling, and the word starts with a D.
Depressed.
Disappointed, right?
I feel depressed with this one because I'm telling you, she keeps me up at night.
So here's what I'm going to tell you.
Because she has so much potential. I mean, she has all the makings for this role.
This is the part. I'm really happy that we got to this point, David, right? Because for every person, right, the other team member who you reset her role, something similar. So we want you to think about this. At some point, right, we want to focus on people that can get us the things accomplished that we need and can serve the purpose of what it is. So in resetting these roles for you, right, I think you should reset and really focus on what was your motivation for hiring this person. What are your expectations of this person? And write that down and see how they align with hers, right? And you need to be able to remove yourself from the outcome, remove yourself from the potential, because when you focus on someone's potential, the fear of loss is on the upside of how great they could potentially be. And then you tend to lose the short-term view of what's actually going on, how much time you're doing it. And when you share things like, then she shares everything we're doing, the difference in that is decision-making, right? Her decision-making says that I can now spend all this time detracting you. See, look, see, look, see, look. It's like what our kids do. You ask them to do something, your kid will tell you, look, mom, look, mom, look, mom. So in the end, you have a business, and your business has a vision, goals, and certain things of standards that have to be met. So David, do you have anything to interject into this?
The only thing I'll add was that she mentioned a minute ago, how much should I micromanage this? Well, that's a good question, Livia, and every leader has to answer that question for him or herself. In your case, you may need to consider working with this person in a way that this person has such a short leash that you give that person a task that's due tomorrow. And you're going to check in, and then that's it. And you check in at that point, and nothing happens unless that check-in happens, and you guys are still on the same page, and it's adequate. And then you take one step further and one step further. The world, unfortunately, is filled with a lot of people who have great intentions. And they do, when they say, I'll do all this, they have the best of intentions to do it. But follow through is what, feeds the business. And so you may need to think such a short-term task or such a small task one by one and have the person agree to that before you go any further. If that's too much micromanaging for you, then this person might not be right for those kinds of tasks.
Okay.
And the other thing is, David, I want to touch upon is, and we'll talk to this about Livia, and she's not going to like it. When do you realize you really need to let somebody go? And how much punishment is enough punishment?
Yeah, a big question. Chirag was just talking about the nice people, the people pleasers. One of the complaints that I hear from people, or I should say laments from leaders, that I hear more than any is, I should have done something sooner. So often when we see that we've had a problem for a long time in our business, we either push it aside, hope it's going to go away, hope it'll just change and turn for the better. But sooner or later, these people tell us in the coaching sessions, I should have done something sooner about that. It may be that this person is just not well suited for that particular role in your business. And if you really like her and she does a lot of other things, it's time to think of a major reset about how she can contribute to the team.
Understood.
Second part to that is, see, look at how Olivia's poor physiology changed. And if you think I'm not going to be calling you to follow up on this, then you really don't
No,
know.
I know you are. I'm going to get a text message, have to reset.
Yeah, here's the second part in doing this, right? Go back to session 1 where we talked about what your hour is worth and realize how much money you're physically losing. And I say this all the time. Look, if you're taking time to deal with this with your employees, you're taking time away from either your business or you could be, for your mom, right? Like we talked about bedtime, putting our kids to bed before we're kind of going through this. All that time you waste doing with this person that they should be helping you taking things off, that's time that's literally going from your family, a vacation, working on your business, a hobby, some just quiet time for you. That's what you have to realize, right? There's costs and payoffs. When you realize that the cost is greater than the payoff, right, you'll make a change, right? But like if the payoff in your mind is like, she has great potential, I don't want to miss out on that, she has great potential, I'm going to get her there. But you're not looking at the cost, that hourly rate, the time away, tasks not getting done, and everything else. It's very challenging. And when you're doing this, and this is depending on your personality type, this gets really hard. Hey, look, the job isn't going the way we want. We're going to collaborate on creating a process together, going through those 5 steps, right, David? And then from there, there's a 30, 60, 90-day review. And if you can't meet these standards, then guess what? Then the job is not going to be yours anymore, but you're 100% in control of that because we're going to make this really simple, right? It's like when you go through David's process that he shared here, you're allowing someone to have ownership of creating that process with you. So if someone can't own a process that they create and you're seeing these examples in your life, you know, it's like the saying, and I'm not going to ask this question because I don't want to see what the chat box will say. When you're in the picture, you can't see the frame. Right? So what are your takeaways and what are your action steps that you're going to do out of this today?
I'm definitely going to do the 5-step process with her, but I think the main thing that I just got is that 30, 60, 90 day. So a lot of I haven't done it as eloquently as this 5-step process is. I've kind of gone from 1 to 3, honestly, like I just jumped right over. And so I'm going to take ownership of needing to go over 2, to understand where she's having issues from her own vantage point. I feel like we've agreed on the new normal several times, and I feel like we've agreed on assessment, but I haven't given her, she's actually calling me right now, I haven't given her a 30, 60, 90-day review. I haven't done that. We're going to reconvene and check in. And the other thing I'm going to take ownership with is when she doesn't do it, if it's something that really needs to be done, it's easier for me to just do it. And I feel like I might be teaching a really bad behavior that gets done anyway. And I don't want that either.
Right. There's no cost to her from that point of view of not doing it, right? It's going to get done by somebody else. You know, the 30, 60 to 90 days is part of the assessment process. It's not just how are we going to measure whether you're doing it or not. It's when are we going to set time aside to talk about what we need to talk about regarding these commitments we're making with each other. So whether it's 30, 60, 90, whether it's 15, 30, 45, whether it's 1, 2, 3, doesn't matter. You need to agree with it. You need to agree on it. You need to put it into your schedules and follow up.
Yep, I'm going to.
One more question that I want to point out to everybody. We've shared a lot about how to be inclusive of the other person's process, right? But at what point do we all look at ourselves and realize that it's not us, it's them, and we're being too mindful, too thoughtful, and like going back to that calculator, we're literally losing money on this ongoing thing. Because look, I can tell you this from like our own team and hiring people, there are a lot of great people that are very motivated that want jobs right now, a lot. So at what point do you say, here's a hard deadline? When you say 30, 60, 90, if you don't meet 30, you're not getting to 60. Some people hear that. And David's question, what was that? repeat back to me the task as you hear that I'm asking to you. I think if I have one takeaway from this session for myself and listening to David, it's that, right? Like sharing something with somebody, then asking them how they heard it. That I think is very powerful. So ask her, when you hear her, when you go through this, how does she hear it? Because clearly, however she's hearing it doesn't work. She thinks you guys are more like friends and buddies because your kids are friends and stuff like that. So in her mind, there might be a different nature of relationships, right? And this is a challenge when friends work together. They want to do everything together. And it's like you guys are out on vacation. We're planning trips together and the beach together and lunch together. And you want to delegate this stuff in your mind so you have more free time to work with clients.
Yep.
Don't have that look. Smile. It's only going to get better from here. I appreciate everyone who stayed on the call. We did go a little bit over today. Does anyone have any questions? And thank you, Livia.
Thank you.
Thank you, Livia.
Thank you.
Thank everybody. So look, we have office hours again on Monday, which have been incredibly helpful. Jimmy has a question about roles and changing roles. Jimmy, shoot. Let's see what you have. Should I turn on video? Unfortunately, the people that know how to promote, hold on, let's see. The person we have here that does all of our technical stuff has left the building. Let me see how I could do this. Promote to panelists. All right, Jimmy, you can turn your video on now.
Hello?
Hey,
Hi.
Jimmy, how are you?
Hello, Jimmy.
Sorry for the mess in my kitchen. I'm having a renovation done. So I'm curious to hear you talk a little bit about, when one of the issues that I've had is sort of occasionally you've hired the person, realized after a while, probably much longer than I should have, it wasn't the right fit. I didn't want to work with them. More often in the times that I've had people change roles or had issues with my team, it's because I've figured out, okay, the role that I hired them for isn't necessarily the best match for their skills or their strengths, or even more common, it's very easy for a new hire or a candidate to sort of convince you or basically give you the answers that you want to hear about what it is that you need and expect from them in that role, but they actually want a different position. Like, namely, I've hired internal or support people being very explicit that this is not like a salesperson role. You're not a buyer's agent. And then 3 months into it, they're like jumping at the opportunity to want to go staff open houses and sort of putting the internal stuff or the marketing stuff or whatever it is in the back burner because they really want to be where the action is and sort of change it. So how do you sort of, reposition people or adjust the roles and move people to a different seat on this? For me, I've had a team of 4 and now it's down to 2. And I sort of at sometimes have realized, like, I've allocated resources to hire this person for this job, and I want to keep them on the team, but it's going to be better in a different job. But now I don't have sort of the bandwidth to hire another person. How do you manage that sort of change?
Oh, David, go ahead.
Yep, sure. I have a couple thoughts. First of all, I think it's really important when you first bring the person on to assess their motivations as accurately as you can. They may say what they think you want to hear. Like, they may just be trying the team and the position you're offering is position A when they really want position B. It's important for you to be able to assess what other motivations they might have, which is they really want job B and they're just saying anything to get job A. That's important. That puts you kind of in the driver's seat and it gives you some things to think about over the course of time. If the person is performing well in job A over time, then there's no reason to make any changes as long as the person is still motivated to be there. If the person starts to lose interest to be there and is therefore not meeting expectations because he or she is really focused on trying to get some other particular position, for you to have a conversation about what that person's motivations are at that time and see if it makes sense for the team and for the business for you to actually make a shift. It might make sense, it might not. It may be possible for you, it might not. But you need to have a conversation about what their motivation is at that time so that you can understand whether it's even possible. As you say, bandwidth could be an issue. On the other hand, it could be that that person could be a better contributor to the team in ever were in position A, because that's where their motivation was all along, assuming they have the right skills or something to do that. So it really takes an open and honest dialogue for you to say, I'm willing to entertain that, but still I'm the leader here and I need to do what's best for the team. So you don't have to guarantee anything. You don't have to promise anything, but you have to have the conversation so that the other person knows what's really reasonable here or possible or not, and that you will make the decision on best behalf of the team. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Chirag, something to add?
I think you nailed it. You know, look, a lot of this stuff is clarity from the start, right? If you go back to those questions, what are your motivations on joining this team? What are your expectations of me as a team leader? And what disappointments you're looking to avoid? If you're able to get to those three things and have clarity in the beginning, and if you see people that kind of have that grass is greener, I would say that people that are admins that want to be agents, they're never going to be satisfied with the agent's pay, right? I mean, the admin pay, because they're always going to look at the agent paychecks and realize that there's so much more, right? It takes a certain type of person to just be completely supportive of another person.
Mm-hmm.
So just be mindful of all these things. And a lot of this is from the beginning. And look, some of this stuff happens, right? It happens over time. People change, especially in this whole COVID world. A lot of people have changed their life views, world views, job views, what they want to do each day, how they want to communicate with people. So just being fluid and open and knowing when to have these conversations and being proactive about them.
Thank you.
And that, as they would say, is all for our regularly scheduled program. We thank you guys for being part of the journey. The next part, we'll talk about substandard performance and section. In session 8, we'll talk about how to put this all together and how do you make sure it all happens in your business and stays consistent. So thank you guys for investing your time with us, and we'll see you in office hours.
Thank you, everyone. See you Monday in office hours.
Bye.